Hello, my darlings, how are you? I hope you're well. It is Wednesday, the middle of October sometime. Here, it's very, very sunny. It's spring. Spring has sprung, definitely. I'm not that well at the moment, so if my voice sounds a little bit weird, that would probably be why. But I wanted to jump on here and give you guys my Roman Empire, but it's queer literature. And so if you don't know, the Roman Empire apparently is something men tend to think about. I don't think I even knew what the Roman Empire was before this trend. I know, red flag. But my Roman Empire, now that I understand it, is definitely queer literature. I have an affinity for queer literature. So I wanted to jump on here and recommend you guys some of my favorite queer books I've read. And yeah, maybe you'll find a new author that you love, a new title that you love, or maybe you would have heard of these books, but you just haven't got around to reading them. So this will be my encouragement for you to do so. So let's get into it. My first recommendation for you all is Timothy Conagreve's Holding the Man. This is set in Melbourne from the 70s to around the 90s, in the middle of the AIDS crisis. And it follows Timothy as he attends a really prestigious boys' school for high school, and he falls madly in love with the captain of the football team, AFL here in Australia it's called, and it follows them as they fall in love. And I don't want to say too much about the plot. This is non-fiction, it's a memoir, but we know that it's devastating right from the start. You know that, and it's beautiful. You have to read it. Next, I want to talk about two Philippe Besson books. Philippe Besson is a French author, so his texts are originally in French and then translated. These are the only two translated works, but if you can read French, there's a plethora of other books that I haven't been able to read because they haven't been translated yet. I'm going to start with Lie With Me. Lie With Me is set in France in the 1980s, and it recounts the story of this writer, and he tells you about his first love and how him and this other boy fell madly and deeply in love with each other, and they orbited around each other in a time where it wasn't really okay to be gay and it wasn't accepted in this small town. And it's an alternating timeline. It's really beautiful and devastating. It's extremely poetic, as you can see there. So many lines that you'll want to underline. And I recently saw the film adaptation of this, and it was mind-boggling. It was exquisite. But yeah, Lie With Me is a beautiful, beautiful gay book that probably is one of my favorites. And then In the Absence of Men, very similar, beautiful edition. It's very small, such a good size for a book. But In the Absence of Men follows a 16-year-old boy in the middle of World War I in France as he comes to terms with his own sexual identity. He meets a writer, and this writer is extremely affluent, and he causes a sexual awakening in this young boy. We've all been there. So it's very relatable, and it also recounts his first love with a soldier who is being sent away to war. This is very much moving, it's devastating, and the prose is magnetic, which all Philippe Besson's work is. Same, Lie With Me, In the Absence of Men, both extremely poetic, devastating novels that you definitely should get your hands on if you can. The next book I want to recommend to you is another Australian book. It's Honeybee by Craig Silvey. This was a book club pick for my book club a few months ago. The link is downstairs. It's held over on Discord. But Honeybee is a really devastating story about a young person who is extremely resilient named Sam, who is coping with so many things, with his mother who's descending further and further into addiction, with grappling with his own sexual and gender identity, with belonging, with otherness, with so many things. And it follows him as he gains a really meaningful connection with an older gentleman. And the thing I loved about this book is that it's grounded in reality. All the characters have flaws, but they also have so many redeeming qualities. They make bad decisions, you want to scream at them, but then they're so beautiful in their own way. And I really, really love this book. It had me sobbing. I feel like that's all I need to say. Please read Honeybee. It's a bit longer, but definitely worth it, and a really easy read in terms of the prose. So yeah. The next recommendation I have for you is On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous by Ocean Vuong. This is Ocean's first novel, and it is beautiful, which makes sense because Ocean is a beautiful person. The way he speaks is so captivating. I'm enamored with him. I would read his grocery list if I can speak. But yeah, this book is beautiful. It's a letter from a young Vietnamese man to his mother who can't speak English, so he knows she's never going to read it. It covers so many interesting and large topics, such as the opioid epidemic, 9/11, first sexual encounters, so many things. And yeah, it's eloquent, it's beautiful, and I was so captivated by this. It's not as accessible as something like Honeybee, but so amazing in its own way, and I love it so much. So if you can get your hands on it, On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous, definitely check it out. The next book that is in my Roman empire of queer literature is Giovanni's Room by James Baldwin, one of the first gay classics, I would say. Fun fact about this book is that you couldn't get it everywhere when it was first published. It was like in lock boxes behind counters because it was dangerous to read this book, which I think is so interesting and really sad. But now I guess we're moving in the right direction that we can get our hands on it. But Giovanni's Room is set in Paris in the 1950s, and it follows a man who falls deeply in a love affair with Giovanni, hence Giovanni's Room. Their love affair is passionate, it's desperate, it's yearning, it's hot, it's sweaty, it's a fever dream, and I loved it. It's really short, it's like 160 pages, the prose is magnetic, James Baldwin is so captivating, so check out Giovanni's Room because this is such a good place to start for queer literature, I think. My next book in my Roman Empire of queer literature is Tin Man by Sarah Winman. I read this a few months ago and it immediately had me enamored and captivated. It follows two boys from their early childhood in the 60s to all the way to the 90s, and it spans decades and so many different people. It's a non-linear structure, it's short, it really packs a punch, but yeah, it really just brings home the importance of small gestures of human connection, of kindness, and how we can impact each other in such a profound way. So yeah, I really love Tin Man. If you can get your hands on this book, I definitely recommend it. The first half's a little bit slow, but the second half really brings it home and packs a punch, and it has so many beautiful lines in it too. So yeah, there you go. Next, some poetry. This is Crush by Richard Syke, and I also have a tattoo for this, Wishbone on my wrist, but this won the 2005 series for Yale's Younger Poets. It's a man-on-man poetry collection. It's gay, it's hot, it's horny, it's full of lust, full of sweat, and I loved it. I've read this so many times. I've folded so many pages down. Richard Syke has a very distinct voice, and so many of the poems have such an urgency to them and a story behind them, and you have to piece them all together. I definitely think reading this in order is needed, and you'll have to read it a few times over, but yeah, these poems sound like they need to be spoken almost. And there's some really great podcasts about Crush and the poems within it. So yeah, Crush by Richard Syke. It's hot, it's sweaty, it's gay. Check it out. My next recommendation is Swimming in the Dark by Thomas Jedrowski. This book is exquisite. It's written in English, but that's not Thomas Jedrowski's first language, which is really amazing. I really have a soft spot for this book because it got me my start on TikTok. It was my first video that did pretty well. But this book is set in 1980s communist Poland, and it follows a young boy as he recounts in a letter his sexual awakening, how he fell in love with a boy, and it just grapples with so many important issues, not only politics and violence and sexual identity, but what it means when the people we love don't share the same moral codes as us, when they don't have the same ideals as us. And it's really devastating. It had me sobbing again, like every other book in this pile. But yeah, definitely check out Swimming in the Dark. The cover is exquisite. The prose is magnetic once again. Please read it. The next recommendation I have, which I don't know why I'm including it because I feel like this is a given, but it's Call Me By Your Name by Andre Asserman. This book is phenomenal. It has a movie adaptation, which is very, very famous. It's set in somewhere in northern Italy, and it follows young Elio as he has a sexual awakening yet again, like all these other books, and he enters this really deep and obsessive love affair with a guest who is staying at his house who is quite a bit older than him. But yeah, I feel like I don't really need to talk too much about this. It's set in Italy, it's gay, it's sweaty, and I loved it. So yeah, Call Me By Your Name, next recommendation. The Argonauts by Maggie Nelson is in a little bit of a different vein to the other ones. This is a queer memoir, I would say, and that's why I included it. But the Argonauts it's a memoir of Maggie Nelson, but it's really genre bending. It covers so many things from art to writing to feminism to queerness, and it talks a lot about her partner's transition and their quest to have a child. So yeah, it's really amazing. It hasn't got any chapters, it's just short passages. You'll want to underline so many things in this, but I think it's a really important read, although it isn't as accessible in terms of ease of read. But The Argonauts by Maggie Nelson nonetheless is chef's kiss, and I recommend it. Next, Patti Smith, my queen, my favorite author. I have 2 tattoos for her also, but Just Kids by Patti Smith recounts her relationship with Robert Mapplethorpe, a very well-respected and highly regarded photographer who mostly used Polaroids and died of HIV. But this is his memoir. He was Patti Smith's best friend and initially lover, and this is just full of vibes. It just has so many amazing stories. My dad just read this, he loved it, so if that isn't a sign, I don't know what is, but read this book, please. My next recommendation is Shuggie Bain by Douglas Stewart. This won the 2020 Booker Prize, so if you don't believe me that this book is good, maybe believe the Booker Prize committee. But this book is set in 1980s Glasgow, in a really poverty-stricken Glasgow, and it follows young Shuggie as he orbits around his mother, who is falling and descending deeper and deeper into addiction. It talks about unconditional love, about what it means to be human and the human condition, about our innate nature to love, and yeah, human kindness. It's so amazing. Shuggie is struggling with his own sexual identity, and it is a truly beautiful book. It has some really, really sweet moments, but also some really devastating moments. And this is one of my favorite books as well. I love this book so much. My next recommendation, which I didn't love quite as much as Shuggie Bain, but still a 5-star read, was Young Mungo by Douglas Stewart. This is Douglas Stewart's second novel. And this is set in the same time period, 1980s, poverty-stricken, hyper-masculine Glasgow, and it's devastating. This one is probably a bit more full-on than Shuggie Bain, but it follows Mungo as he comes to terms with his own sexual identity, and he begins his first relationship with a boy called James. But it's also a non-linear structure, and it flicks between timelines where he is sent away on a fishing trip with these men from his mother's AA group that he doesn't know, and some really disturbing and devastating things happen to Mungo there. But yeah, really good book, really devastating, upsetting, but great, because I love a book that makes me cry. Yeah, so those are all my queer Roman Empire book recommendation sort of things. I hope you enjoyed it. If you've read any of those books, let me know. If you're planning on reading them, let me know. They're amazing. There's a really diverse range there, so I think you might get something that you really enjoyed out of it. Yeah, I hope you're well. Let me know any updates in the comment section. Look downstairs for all my links, my Instagram, my book club, my TikTok is all there. So yeah, I can't wait to see you whenever I see you. But yeah, toodaloo, bye.